Hello and welcome back to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at Folio in downtown Seattle is author Julianna Baggott. Her new book, a collection of short stories, is called I'd Really Prefer Not to Be Here With You. And I'm smiling because I loved this collection of stories. Julianna, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So the first book of yours that I read, which was later in your career, is Harriet Wolf's 7 Books of Wonder, and I just loved that book. It was exactly the kind of book that draws me in, very character driven. The writing was great. I thought you did such a good job making these characters come alive. And I know when we were chatting a little bit before we started, you said that it wasn't. Let's say what you said about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't always, write in the genre that I would most like to read or that I'm most, that I'm drawn to. It's the story that appears first, and then I have to kind of find the best possible genre for that story. But I love a lot of like big sweeping historical novels, and I love quirky novels and unusual characters, and so it was a joy to write that book. It took me a long time to write it, but it was a joy to write.
But what was that? Yeah, I see the way you described the novels that you like that have a little bit of quirk, that have this kind of historical periods, and that's my what do we say? That's my lane or whatever. And you handled the quirk so beautifully in those. The characters are quirky enough so that they're recognizable because we're all quirky in our own way, and again, I just love the writing. So I do want to recommend that book to our viewers and listeners as well, because it was just a joy to read. Why was it hard to write, or why did it take you so long, do you think?
It's a big book. Like, it's a very ambitious novel. It spans the 20th century. It's a lot of research. I probably wrote into it and then into another novel and then into another novel a few times, because if you don't let something go and release it. So that's the nice thing about the short stories, is that I can't hold them that long. There it is. It either works in its DNA or it doesn't. I can write the whole thing and then no one sees it, and sometimes I rework them, but I really enjoy, at a certain point, I had more ideas than I had the desire to run marathons. Like, here's a concept and a world, and I want to write it. And then I've got another one coming, and I want to write it. And so that's why the short story was always my favorite form. It's just that novels for a long time, were just selling better for me, and that's
Right.
what the industry wanted. And then, with short stories, the film industry and television industries were more interested in them. And then suddenly there was energy there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I get to go back to what I love, which I am a sprinter, in my heart. I love to like have the idea, run, and then be done with it. So, these stories, I mean, that makes it sound like I didn't edit them. They're painfully, what is the best possible version of this? So again, some of these took a long time. Some of them didn't. Every once in a while you have a short story that kind of comes out whole, and then you think for the rest of your life that it's always going to come out whole. So I love doing the high concept worlds. And then I like to tell a really intimate story inside of a really big concept. And that's what this collection is.
Mm-hmm. When you said that the story comes to you first, and then you have to find the right genre to make the most of the story, when do the characters appear? Because one of the things that comes through so beautifully in this collection of stories are the various voices of the narrators.
Well, with the title story, I'd really prefer not to be here with you. I had a very specific audience. when my kids were little, they had a babysitter who's very, very, very funny, and she went on to write comedy for television. She now is a writer on The Family Guy, and I wanted to write something. I had this idea, and I wanted to write something that would make her laugh, really hard. And I loved Fleabag. I love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I feel like her writing allows a lot of space for women to be messy and emotional and corrupted in their own way, but also seeking redemption. And so I really I loved Fleabag. So I really, what I wanted to do was like Fleabag in tone, but a sci-fi twist. You know what I mean? Like a big high concept world. So for me, I'm always talking about inners and outers. And the outer is the idea. With that one, it was, I've thought for a long time there should be a dating app that you get dinged by your exes if you're trash. Like if you're a bad partner, you should get dinged. And I had been in my mind for a very long time as a very good idea. But then I thought, well, what if you were the one who got dinged so hard that you got banned for life from all dating apps? And then, so I had that. And then I knew I had these characters that I wanted, a type of character I wanted to so move through it. So the outer is the idea, but then I think, okay, what person should be, moved into this? What's the inner of this? And so it's like, it's a needle. And then how are you going to thread it with one specific life, one human being's? And so you really want those things to kind of exploit each other so that the idea really is matching with something that's, a person going through something that really makes those things collide and bump up against each other. And so I'm always thinking about and I'm collecting outers. I'm always collecting big ideas, but I'm also constantly collecting little inners. A person I see on the street, and I imagine their backstory, and immediately like, oh my gosh, how did they get there with one shoe? Or just funny lines that are said in the house. Somebody goes on a big riff. I was terrified of frogs as a child. It's in there. There's all these different
Right.
So yeah, so that's how I kind of conceptualize it.
And do you keep a notebook? I mean, do you write those things down?
Yeah, and so I have. Well, I'm looking at a wall filled with little tiny pieces of paper that are mostly, ideas and concepts. Over there, there's a wall that's filled with little tiny memories and details. And then we have like a big, I text things to my husband or voice them, send them, and he puts them in just a really big document. And every once in a while, he'll go through and say, these are the big ideas. These are the little tiny moments.
Oh,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
so everything, it's not so much like which comes first. It's like I have a bunch of this and a bunch of that, and then it's matching them. Which ones would make, you know, pairings that would be too obvious or easy pairings, but which ones would make pairings that, ooh, that's unexpected, but I would love to see this person in that world trying to figure it out.
Did you write as a kid too?
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote my whole life. My sister she's 9 years older than I am, and so she was living in New York as an actor when I was still little, and we went into the city all the time. And my parents go to plays, tons and tons and tons of plays. So I saw a lot of really bad theater, occasionally incredible theater. So yeah, I really my ear was what was trained early. I mean, and so once I have a voice, I really can say, oh, this person's going to tell me the story. I can kind of sit back a little bit and let them go.
Uh-huh. When you get that sort of combination of inner and outer, do you always know whether it should be a short story or a longer piece?
Yeah,
It announces itself to
it
you.
announces itself. But
Uh,
of course, also it's also about like finding pleats. So if I have something that's small, I can see the pleats and open them up if I
yeah.
need to make it bigger, and then I can close them. Cast of characters, how many points of view, how much time passes. There's all these different ways that pleats kind of open up and a story can get bigger
Mm.
or can accordion down. And that's just experience over time, kind of figuring those things out.
Are there short story writers that you really admire or short stories that you wish you'd written?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I really love a lot of writers. You specifically, it's funny because as I was sitting here, I was thinking about point of view and how one of the stories in the collection is Welcome to Oxhead, which was me doing, the collective we of virgin suicides, which I could never do and sustain the way that Eugenides does for a
Right.
novel. There's just that's a magic trick. But I felt like I definitely could use that voice in a short story. It's a very short story, it's a 6 or 7 page short story. But I really wanted to have that kind of disembodied but like big voice for a world. So I am always looking at other writers and trying to figure out what they're doing and see if I can use them, their technique, their voice, their blueprint of
Mhm.
what they've done. Yeah.
The other big we novel that I always think about is Joshua Ferris's Then We Came to the End.
Oh, he's very funny.
Yeah.
He's very funny and heartbreaking.
Yes.
Um, yeah, we met each other at a bar once, not knowing that we were writers. I was just very, very hungry, and the bar had nothing to eat, so I just asked for like celery and maraschino cherries, things that you would put in a drink. And he and I started talking, and we tried to be normal people. It was really funny. We were both trying to be normal. Like, there was a Red Sox game on, and we tried to talk about sports, and we tried to talk about and just chatting to kill the time. And then we found out that we both come from the same publishing house, like wandered out of the same publishing. I was there for another meeting with a film person, and we figured out who each other were. But he is very, very funny. I think Tom Perrotta's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Mary Morrissey is, I don't know if you would love Mary Morrissey. She's an Irish writer. Mother of Pearl was really an incredible novel for me to go into, Harriet Wolfe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Unraveling by Elizabeth Graver. Elizabeth Graver has a new,
Yes, she does.
yeah, I haven't picked it up yet. Have you?
No, I have it at home.
Yeah, I'm excited about her because she does historical fiction in that way that feels just, like you're not caught up in a disconnect from time, but you're really with living, breathing people. She's amazing. Yeah, so there are a number of people. For short stories, I'm trying to think. I mean, uh, well, Marquez had a short story collection. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He's part of the reason why I'm here. I would say he's part of the
Really?
problem. Yeah, I blame him. Lewis Gordon, the old Southern Gothic short story writers.
Uh-huh.
I love. Yeah. So there are a lot of
Um,
great.
yeah, one of with voice, I always think of Lori Moore when she was
Oh yeah.
early in her career when she was writing short stories. And I think when I was reading your collection, and the various voices, I was thinking of Lori Moore and those wonderful, quotable.
Time you see me trying to describe a character feeling self-conscious, that's her. I mean,
Uh-huh.
she can do a little beat. Like there's that story where she says, I know how I must have looked to the doctor, like a dumpling, like my face like a dumpling or something like that. She can just flip it and she's so funny and so heartbreaking. And I love
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
favorite knife edge. Um, yeah, so she really taught me craft wise how to be very, succinctly funny, and Nabokov too. He's always could be incredibly succinctly funny. Yeah, which is also screenwriting. A lot of what I've learned from screenwriting is, you get like this much to write a little character description. It better be really hilarious. Yeah.
Right. Right. So, are you doing a lot of screenwriting these days? I know several of the stories are already. Are they are? Yeah.
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 Yeah, a bunch of them are. In fact, that Welcome to Oxhead is with Jessica Biel's company and Paramount. And then Backwards is the big story in there. We didn't know it was a big story when we wrote the collection, but it turned out to, there was a bidding war and it ended up with Netflix and Sean Levy attached to direct.
And give us the plot of that story.
Yeah, Backwards. So I work with my son on the film and television side. Has an encyclopedic brain for film. He's Brooklyn-based writer, and filmmaker. And Although he's very, he's still very young. I mean, I don't know, maybe he's 26, 27. I don't know. Who cares? You know what I mean? I can't keep track of the children. But anyway, so he was in film school for master's program at Brooklyn College, and he just felt like, I'm not learning enough. I'm not learning anything new. And so he dropped out. And then that January, we said, why don't you be idea generation for us? Just come up with ideas because you're fantastic at that. And so he did. He just started generating ideas. He'd send them to us and whatever. And then one of them was Backwards, which it has a Benjamin Buttons part to it, like it is about de-aging. But basically, when you in a near future, when you know that you're going to die, you have two options. Option A is kind of to naturally do it and go into hospice and be surrounded by those you love. Or option B, you can de-age, like go back through your life and really in the end die of young age. And like a couple decades, a decade a day kind of thing going backwards. And so this, again, it's like, well, how do I enter that story? What life goes into that story? And as somebody who's a sandwich generation, with older parents in their late 80s, who I'm the primary point person, I live very close to them, and with kids, I was very interested in the person who would be the daughter who's estranged from her father and who gets called in to kind of be the point person for him to de-age, and how they would so quickly have to come to terms with their relationship. And also how much when someone is older, and the parent becomes the child, and that reversal that happens, it's so beautiful. And I wanted to do that with someone who had a long way to go and and couldn't really actually maybe get to the forgiveness as cleanly as they could have, because I think that a lot of people don't get clean forgiveness, at the end sometimes, but it doesn't matter. When you're losing someone, it doesn't matter. It becomes more primal than that.
Right. I think that one of the things about the collection that I found so interesting is, I mean, they're all clearly your ideas, your inners and your outers, but each of the stories has its own strength and its own appeal, and they're going to, in many ways, appeal for different reasons to different people. Because I found that that de-aging one, it was very moving. It was in a way humorous. I mean, it had the same. I mean, it's hard for me to see that you could write a short story that doesn't have some humor, because that's you, right? but it was a story that was so moving and flipped everything that you think. I really thought about, if that had been possible, for me and my father, what would that have been like? That would have answered a lot of questions for me. So, I don't want people to think, this is a book, these are humorous, very clever, lovely short stories, but there's a bedrock underneath them that's really a commentary on the way we live our lives, I thought.
Yeah, I think that, well, and there's also some horror in there too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Really, which comes from my own, some very personal parts of my life that I had to, figure out and process. So the horror is definitely me processing actual things that happened. But so also I really like to make people laugh, especially in certain ones, because they open their arm. You laugh, you throw yourself back, you open up your chest. The things that you do, and it's so much easier to punch somebody when they're laughing. So the emotional punch, that's one of my favorite things to be able to do, to disarm people and then punch them.
Yeah. The title story about the young woman, about the group therapy for people who have been banned for life from dating apps. I have to say, that was the first one I read. I usually start with the title story when I'm reading a collection, and I just wanted to read the whole thing out loud. I mean, I kept calling my husband and saying, "Oh my God, this is so clever." you know, and you always want to just say, how did you get the idea for that? But, you know,
Yeah, I know. No, this is, and especially with Ubers, once I found out that Ubers, not only you could ding the driver, but the driver could ding you, I thought, oh, well, friends, here we are. We've done it. And to be honest, I was a little bit afraid. I was like, I've got to go around being nicer. I mean, I have just in French, but like cursed out a French cab driver so viciously, because he was pulling into oncoming traffic and whatnot to change lanes in Paris. And I was with my mother and holding a baby. And I just, went off. And my mom was she had no idea what I was saying, but she was like, oh my God. So I was like, yeah, I'm not always my best self. I'm not always my best self. Although in that situation, I still feel like we needed to get out of that car. But yeah, so the idea that, that was something that I just held on to. And then, the details on every page, people say, like, where did you get the idea for that? And I'm like, every story is like 17 million little ideas, that you like, is this the story it belongs in? Is this and you're constantly, yeah. So there's this guy named Melnick who, in I think the late 60s, defined creativity as associative memory that works exceptionally well.
mm,
And I don't think that's everybody's description that works for everyone, because I think a lot of people are generative from a really deeply imaginative space, you know what I mean? Or they're blocked from the subconscious aspect of that. That really just pops for them. And it's a world that they are unfamiliar with. But for me, it's all about associative memory. You know what I mean? I constantly, like, I have a Rolodex of my life, and every story I've ever heard and every detail, and I'm moving through them. And so everything's like, I don't know, glittered, with all of that. So that's why I think the specificity is funny, specificity is heartbreaking. That's the way you get there.
Great. What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out as a writer, wanting to be a writer, wanting to write? I think there's a difference between saying I want to be a writer and I want to write.
Yeah, it's hours. It's drilling the hours. Obviously, like, figuring out who you love and reading them viciously, really hating certain writers. I have writers who come in who just love everything that they read. And I think, oh, you're impossible for me to teach how to write, because you love everything. Go out and hate something.
Right.
Pick somebody just to really rip, So I love writers who are, who love obsessively and read something. And again, like, don't read it as entertainment, take it apart, be a young engineer given a clock, like, take off the back, figure out how all the gears work. So don't be a fan, stop being a fan. And that goes for screenwriters too, stop loving the show, go back and watch it and figure out how they made you feel that,
Right. Right.
Yeah, and then I do think that novelists in particular, but short story writers too, I think it's really great to learn screenwriting. It is a way to figure out if something's to scale. So if you're looking at a big, huge canvas of a novel, so many novelists, especially young novelists, who haven't done it before, they don't know what to scale is. And so they start oil painting paragraph to paragraph in one corner, and they don't even realize, like, wait, is this going to be to scale? So how's this going to? Whereas screenwriting really helps you move quickly and get, a real sketch that covers the whole canvas. And at least you get to more quickly understand how story works, and how it can be changed and be more flexible with it. So, yeah, I think architecturally, it's really important to try to figure out screenplays, whether you read or you write one or not, but at least try to figure out how story works in that way. And then read poets, because poets are going to teach you epiphany. Poets are going to teach you image. They're really, really great at those things. And then, whatever genre you're in. So my thing is, like, don't ever, pigeonhole yourself. You might get pigeonholed later, but and you might find what you love later, but every genre has things to teach you. And so really try to figure out all the different genres to feed your central genre.
Wow, I know that's, I get this feeling that everybody who's going to watch or listen to this podcast is going to want to take a class from you. I think you just, that it's very, very inspiring. I want to recommend, since you recommended Mary Morrissey to me, I want to recommend a book to you called The Diamond Lane by Karen Carbo. So it's funny and it's moving, and I think it's the kind, and it's about filmmaking as well, and the mother and daughters and sisters. I think it's an older title, and I always like to recommend older titles. So I think you would really love it.
Yeah, I know Karen Carbo, but I don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love writing women. I mean, the book is, I think it's
Yep.
100% women. I think it is. Pretty
Yeah.
sure. Um, yeah. I do teach at Florida State University. I teach screenwriters there. I mentor about, 8 students, a year. And so I love that. But I do have some things. I do have a jumpstart writer to writer like thing that you can go.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
efficient creativity. If you look up Julianna Baggott, efficient creativity, there
Okay.
are 2 things. There's one like an audio series where I talk about process, really, really
Oh,
talk about process.
okay.
And then the other one is, just like, a 6-week thing where you get prompts and things like that.
Oh,
Um, yeah,
great.
but I think honestly, the best thing, I mean, especially on the short story, is to read short stories. And, I mean, what I always say to students is like the book you love is, and then to a certain extent, the book you hate, but every short story you read is a master class with that teacher, with that writer. And so really, I mean, if you want to learn how to write like me, I think buying the book, I'd really prefer not to be here with you. And then you're getting all of my past education
Yeah,
and
right.
drilling of all the hours I've done and all the different genres you get. You're the beneficiary. If you're reading it not as a fan, but you're reading it as a writer.
Right. Wow, Julianne, I feel like we could go on and talk some more, but our time is up. And gosh, thank you so much. Thank you for being the writer that you are, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye bye.